Everyone, today we are diving deep inside the most incredible chemical factory in the universe, and it's your own body. We're going to see how it handles the absolute fundamental building blocks of life, amino acids, and find out what happens when just one tiny piece of the machinery breaks down.
All right, let's start with a really weird question. Just imagine this. You're feeling totally fine, but you notice something bizarre. Your urine, when you leave it out, turns black. I know, it sounds like something from a fantasy novel, but it's a real medical thing that actually helped us crack open one of the biggest secrets of our own bodies.
The condition has a name, alkaptonuria, or AKU. For hundreds of years, it was just this strange curiosity, but it turned out to be the key that unlocked our understanding of metabolism, not as just one big process, but as this huge, sprawling, interconnected factory assembly line. You see, alkaptonuria was one of the very first genetic conditions that we ever figured out. It's what scientists call an inborn error of metabolism. So think of your body as this massive factory with thousands of assembly lines, and each one has a very specific job. Well, an inborn error just means that one of the machines on the line was basically broken right out of the box from the moment you were born. And this is not some new thing we just discovered. The first time anyone wrote it down was way back in 1584. We're talking over 400 years ago, describing a perfectly healthy schoolboy who had this exact same, very strange symptom. It was this centuries-old puzzle that gave us our first real clue that, specific little chemical reactions can go wrong inside of us.
So, to really get why the urine turns black, we've got to go down to the factory floor. We need to look at that one specific assembly line and see how it's supposed to run when everything's working perfectly.
Okay, so here's a super simplified look at the assembly line for breaking down an amino acid called tyrosine. So it comes in as the raw material. The first enzyme, which is kind of like a worker with a specific tool, changes it a bit. Then a second enzyme comes along and changes it again, creating this intermediate product called homogentisate. Now here's the problem in alkaptonuria. That third enzyme, the machine that's supposed to handle homogenisate, it's broken. So what happens? You get a pileup, a huge traffic jam. The factory has no choice but to get rid of all this excess stuff, so it dumps it into the urine. And once it hits the air, it oxidizes and turns black. All of that from just one broken machine.
But here's the thing. This factory isn't just about breaking stuff down and getting rid of waste. No way. Using those exact same amino acid building blocks, our bodies build some of the most incredible, essential molecules you can imagine. This is where metabolism gets really, really cool.
And this is where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Just look at this table. It's just a tiny snapshot of what's going on. That very same tyrosine that causes all the trouble in AKU, your body also uses it to create melanin, which is the pigment in your skin. Tryptophan, the thing in turkey that supposedly makes you sleepy, gets turned into serotonin and melatonin, which run your mood and your sleep cycle. Glutamate becomes GABA, a chemical that literally calms your brain down. Our bodies aren't just processing stuff, they're molecular artists. Just take serotonin, for instance. It's built from that amino acid tryptophan, and it's like a master controller for your mood, your sleep, even your digestion. All of that complex biology from one simple building block that got re-engineered on the factory floor. And GABA is just a fantastic example of this power. The amino acid glutamate gets converted into GABA, which is basically the brain's brake pedal. It is the main chemical messenger that tells your neurons to just chill out and stop firing so much. So a tiny, tiny chemical change to an amino acid directly impacts how you think and feel. It's incredible. So let's get back to this idea of a broken machine. Because alkaptonuria, as weird as it is just one example. There are so many other assembly lines in this factory, and pretty much any one of them can have a faulty part, leading to totally different and often much more serious issues. A classic example is phenylketonuria, or PKU. That's caused by a totally different broken enzyme. This time, it leads to a toxic pileup of the amino acid phenylalanine, which, if you don't catch it at birth, can cause severe brain damage. Then you have things like maple syrup urine disease, which is named for the sweet smell of an infant's urine, and that comes from yet another broken machine on a completely different assembly line. Now, something like MSUD is pretty rare, right? It affects about 1 in 200,000 babies. But for that one baby, for that one family, the consequences are absolutely life-altering. And that right there is why understanding the blueprint of this factory is so unbelievably important. It lets us spot the problem from day one. So everything we've talked about so far has been about genetic defects, these broken machines. But a factory can shut down for another big reason. What happens when you just don't get enough raw materials delivered to the loading dock? This is where metabolism and nutrition collide. And you can see here that not all malnutrition is created equal. On the left, you have kwashiorkor. In this case, a child might be getting enough calories, say from carbohydrates, but not nearly enough protein, not enough of those essential amino acid building blocks. The result is this tragic swelling as the body's systems fail. On the right, you have marasmus. That is basically total starvation, a lack of calories and protein, which leads to this severe wasting away. Two totally different supply chain failures with two completely devastating outcomes.
Which really brings us to the big so what question. We've looked at broken machines, we've looked at supply shortages. Why does having this incredibly detailed blueprint of our internal factory actually matter in the real world?
Well, it matters because this knowledge literally saves lives. Because we know about the broken machine in PKU, we can test every single newborn for it. And because we know exactly which raw material is causing that toxic pileup, we can create a special diet that avoids it, completely preventing brain damage. This entire area of science is the foundation for modern nutrition, and it lets us diagnose and treat diseases at their most basic chemical root.
So we've journeyed from a strange 16th century mystery about black urine all the way to being able to read the complex chemical code that runs our entire bodies. And it really leaves you with a pretty profound thought. If we've already gotten this good at just working around the errors in the code, what happens when we can finally go in and start rewriting it? Thanks for joining me.